What is the definition of queer? The more relevant dictionary definition is very broad and includes everyone who is not heterosexual and cisgender. Another definition, however, is to be weird or strange, and this does bring up a point. What does it mean to be queer? In the modern era, queer can be used as a description, insult, or representation of a person, but queer generally means that you are a part of the LGBTQ+ community. So what does it mean to be queer on a deeper level? Most people who are queer have either heard of or experienced some sort of discrimination based on their identity. Sometimes this happens even within their own communities. In our keywords discussion queer on June 24th, our classmate Hannah Jones brought up a wonderful point on what the definition of queer is. To sum their passage up, Hannah states that being queer isn't necessarily a catch-all description for people of the LGBTQ+ community. Rather, it's a way to normalize being a part of the community in a heteronormative world. I like this quote because it gives a new meaning to a word that was originally used as a way to call someone strange or weird. In another keywords discussion, femme, on June 24th, our classmate Katie Skripach brings up another great point about identity. Essentially, they say that to be femme isn't to conform to what everyone expects of someone. Rather, it is to express oneself because that's who they are as a person. One last keywords post I'm going to bring up is July 15th discussion. Our classmate Carissa Velazquez brought up yet another amazing point about identity. In short, Carissa states that it's interesting the way that people in our society pick our pronouns from visual cues, and it's essentially that way from day one. Each one of these classmates brought up a very interesting and thought-provoking thoughts about identity. Oftentimes, we think that the main enemy against queer community is homophobes, but often people within their queer community can consider another lesser or inferior because they don't conform to labels. In our keywords discussion under Western Eyes on July 8th, the highlighted phrase discusses how queer experiences are grouped into one basket, which is the Western queer experience. This essay discusses how diverse and expansive the queer experience is. For simplicity's sake, or for a lack of a general knowledge, these key moments are considered the queer Western experience rather than being one experience as a whole. This brings up another point about identity. Why is it that everything that's non-conformative to society's standards needs to be dumbed down or simplified? The keywords discussion on June 25th brings up a similar point. Sex is seen as a taboo topic to talk about in general, but this article seems to try and normalize it. Sex is a very important part of human nature, as it's essentially how to reproduce. It seems as if sex is only acceptable to talk about when someone is talking in terms of reproduction, but when someone brings it up as a form of pleasure, it suddenly becomes weird and taboo. This is especially relevant in the case of same-sex couples who can't reproduce naturally. In our keyword discussion on July 5th, they mention the colonization of queer backgrounds, yet it brings up a new point. These same tactics of trying to get more minority voices don't seem to be working anymore. It's up to the queer community to try and make a difference. Now we will move on to some articles. In the article Not Yet Queer Enough, Constructing Identity Through Culture, the authors of the article write how some queer folk don't feel queer enough, as if their experiences are invalid. The queer community in general also forces labels as a way to define one's identity. The quote shown on screen mentions the terms good femininity and masculinity. These terms tend to conform to society's ideal image of a man and woman. But what does it mean to not conform? Why is one considered weird for wanting to act or dress how they want? Moving on to another article, this one talks about non-Western queer spaces. In the article, Anti-Identity, Politics, and the State, Queer Challenges and Future Directions, the authors state that queer festivals take into account their local contexts when they address their politics, but they rather see the local existing in interaction with the transactional into a dynamic relationship which produces its own effects. This raises the question, what happens in communities that the queer community in the United States doesn't hear about? To conclude, being queer is all about one's own identity. There is no correct way to be queer, as there are many facets and subgroups within the community. While there are voices that tend to group the queer experience as a Western experience, there are several other voices that counteract the fact that it's so much more than one combined understanding. Thank you.